I woke up the next day to my 7 o'clock alarm from a disturbed night's sleep. I had woken several times in the night in a cold sweat with images of the man from the night before filling my head. The day had dragged by slowly and I felt my body becoming more tired and the minutes mercilessly ticked on. Come the end of school I felt like I was hanging by a thread. I slowly ambled home by myself, in the rain, as my usual ride home. My best friend Olivia had found herself otherwise occupied, meaning she wanted to go over her boyfriend's house while his parents weren't home. I got home from school at 4 o'clock and went straight upstairs before ditching my bag on the floor and flopping onto my bed. My body molded with the mattress and I felt comfort like nothing else. My eyes began to shut and soon I was asleep. Alex, we're going now. A loud shout woke me from my sleep. I raked open my eyes and sighed at my disturbance. Heavy footsteps came pounding up the stairs and Scott came bouncing into my room like an excited puppy. Have you been asleep all afternoon? He asked but continued without giving me time to answer. It's 8 o'clock, you lazy sod. He exclaimed, chortling lightly to himself. What do you want, Scott? I asked groggily. Me and Dad are going now, he said. Great, I exclaimed sarcastically. Where are you going? I asked, feeling rather confused. Scott sighed, frustrated. Alex, we told you yesterday. We're going up to Newcastle this weekend for the university open day, he said nonchalantly. The clogs in my head clicked into place and I remembered everything now. Yeah, right. Sorry, I swear I've got memory loss, I said cheekily. Are you sure you'll be alright here on your own? He said worriedly. Scott, I will be fine. I'm 17. I cried. Yeah, but you're still my little baby sister, I yelled before tackling me onto the bed and messing up my hair with his hands. Get off me, you oaf, I shouted as I shoved him onto the floor, which he landed on with a thud. He picked himself up and laughed loudly at me. Your hair looks funny, he said cheekily. I sent him a glare and he backed up with his hands in front of him. Money for food's on the kitchen counter. You know the usual. Don't open the door to strangers, no house parties, no boys, blah blah blah. We'll be back on Sunday. See ya, he said chirpily before swiftly exiting my room. I heard him and my father leave and then the car went roaring off down the road. The house fell silent and I was now alone. I crawled out of bed and dragged my feet across the hall to the bathroom. I had to feel around in the darkness for the light switch as the sun had long gone down. I cringed as the room was filled with beams of bright light which bounced off the mirror hanging on the wall. It took me several minutes before I was finally able to open my eyes and they became fully adjusted to the harsh brightness. I switched on the shower and rid myself of my school clothes which still clung to my body from earlier today. I stretched my hands high above my head. My spine clicked loudly and a moan of discomfort escaped my mouth as my muscles were stiff and aching from the uncomfortable position I had napped in. The water warmed up quickly and stepping into the shower felt blissful as I immersed myself under the torrent of hot water. Slowly my muscles began to relax as my aching body was massaged by the almost scalding stream. I reached for the shampoo and slowly worked it onto my scalp before I running my fingers through my hair as I rinsed the lavender-smelling foam from it. I away from the cascading spray to wipe the water from my eyes. I turned the shower off and wrapped myself in a warm and fluffy bath towel as I stepped out. I padded back to my room after I had finished applying moisturizer. I dried and brushed my hair quickly before throwing it up into a messy bun. My hair was a very dark brown which I always thought went with my tan skin well. I pulled on some casual clothes and headed downstairs to find some food. As I was trudging slowly out of my room I heard a noise. A soft clunk. I stopped for a moment and listened again. Nothing. I shook my head and continued downstairs. You're just being paranoid, I told myself. I stopped by my front door and checked the handle. Locked. I let out a sigh of relief and carried on to the kitchen. I entered the room and stopped dead in my tracks. The back door to my house was open. A chilling wind drifted in through the open door and whistled over my face. My hands began to shake and heart was beating erratically. Okay, you need to calm down. Scott probably forgot to lock the door. No, even better, he probably is just trying to scare you. I still hadn't fully convinced myself, so I stretched out my arm to reach for the house phone which sat on the kitchen worktop. My arm was almost perpendicular to my body when suddenly two strong arms came from nowhere and wrapped around my waist with a vice-like grip. I twisted and struggled in my captor's hold, but my efforts were in vain. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. My throat was bone dry and I felt weak and powerless. A sour-smelling cloth was brought up to my face and roughly pressed over my mouth. A pungent smell filled my nostrils, and I had watched enough films to know what was happening. Don't breathe. Don't breathe. Don't breathe. Why don't you just make this a whole lot easier for the both of us and take a nice deep breath for me? A deep and husky voice purred into my left ear. I began to feel lightheaded and my lungs screamed for air. With one last blink of my eyes I gasped for breath, my throat filling with the foul chemical. Good girl, he whispered before taking my earlobe between his teeth and biting gently. The last thing I remember was the feel of his hot breath on my neck before I slumped in his arms, drifting into a dreamless sleep.